My name is Mark, and I've been an avid mountaineer for over a decade. Winter expeditions have always held a special place in my heart, the challenge of braving the cold, the thrill of navigating through snow-covered peaks, and the solitude that only a frozen wilderness can offer. This year, I was preparing for what I had planned as my most ambitious solo journey yet, a deep winter trek into the remote Alaskan wilderness. The area was notorious for its harsh weather and unforgiving terrain, but I was confident. I had survived more than a few punishing trips without incident, and I was eager to test my skills against the stark, icy landscape. As I packed my gear and made final preparations, the locals offered their usual mix of advice and warnings. I was no stranger to their tales, but one particular legend caught my attention. They spoke of disappearances, people who had ventured into those woods during brutal winters, never to be seen again. The stories were steeped in superstition, strange lights in the sky, eerie howls echoing through the trees, and shadows moving just beyond the edge of sight. The older residents whispered about a presence, something ancient and restless living beneath the snow and ice. I listened politely but dismissed these as the kind of folklore that thrives in isolated places, meant to keep unwary travelers cautious rather than to convey any real danger. The morning I set out, the sky was a pale gray, heavy with the promise of snow. I strapped my pack tighter, adjusted my goggles, and stepped into the silent wilderness. The cold bit into my skin almost immediately, but I welcomed it. The crunch of snow underfoot and the whisper of wind through the pines were familiar companions. For the first few days, the journey was as expected, physically demanding but manageable. I navigated frozen streams, climbed steep ridges, and set up camp under the glow of a pale sun that barely breached the horizon. Yet, beneath the routine, a subtle unease began to creep in. One afternoon, while crossing a narrow ridge, I caught sight of something, or someone, watching me from the edge of a distant tree line. The figure stood motionless, cloaked in heavy winter gear that blended almost seamlessly with the surrounding snow. I froze, heart pounding, and called out. There was no response. As I approached, the figure vanished, leaving only a faint imprint in the snow and an unsettling silence. I scanned the area, but no footprints or signs of passage revealed a trail. It was as if the watcher had simply melted into the wilderness. The encounter planted a seed of doubt, but I told myself it might have been a hunter or another traveler, equally cautious and elusive. Later that day, while traversing a narrow valley flanked by towering spruce, I stumbled upon footprints half buried beneath fresh snow. At first, I assumed they belonged to a moose or a bear, common in these parts, but as I examined them closely, something didn't add up. The impressions were enormous, far too large to be human, and the pattern was irregular, almost as if the creature moved with a loping gait that didn't match any animal I knew. The toes, if they could be called that, appeared clawed but not like any predators I'd tracked before. A chill ran down my spine, not from the cold, but from the mystery these prints suggested. That night, as I huddled inside my tent, the wind howled outside like a living thing. I tried to focus on my maps and gear, but my mind kept drifting back to the figure and the prints. The silence of the wilderness no longer felt peaceful, it was heavy, expectant. I double-checked my supplies and made sure my radio was working, though I knew signal strength was shaky this far in. The local stories echoed faintly in my thoughts, more persistent now, like a warning I hadn't been ready to hear. I remembered a trip 2 years earlier in the Rockies, where I and a group of friends had camped near a glacier. One night, a storm had trapped us inside our tents, and strange noises had kept us awake, whispers and distant thumps that no one could explain. Back then, we joked it was just the mountain's way of asserting itself. But now, alone in the Alaskan wild, those memories felt less like humor and more like premonition. Sleep came in fitful bursts. I thought I heard movement outside, shadows shifting just beyond my tent's thin walls. I convinced myself it was the wind, the trees brushing against the fabric, or perhaps a curious animal. But deep down, a part of me knew something was watching, waiting. The wilderness had always demanded respect, but this felt different, like an ancient presence that didn't welcome intruders. The next morning, I woke to a fresh snowfall, the landscape transformed into a pristine white canvas. I packed up quickly, eager to put distance between myself and last night's unease. As I broke camp, I noticed more footprints near the edge of the clearing, circling in a pattern that seemed almost ritualistic. They led away into the forest, disappearing beneath a thick blanket of snow. I snapped a few photos, unsure if anyone would believe what I was seeing. Despite the growing tension, I pushed forward. The expedition had just begun, and I was determined to face whatever lay ahead. Yet, with each step, the wilderness seemed to close in tighter, the silence growing heavier, and the shadows lengthening in ways that defied the sun's position. The legends, the figure, the footprints, they all felt connected, pieces of a puzzle I was only beginning to comprehend. In my years of mountaineering, I had learned to trust my instincts. Now, those instincts were screaming at me to be cautious, to prepare for the unexpected. But the wilderness is indifferent to human fears or desires. It waits patiently, hiding its secrets beneath layers of ice and snow, ready to reveal them only to those brave, or foolish, enough to seek them out. The days that followed only deepened the sense of dread that had taken root inside me. The temperature plummeted sharply, the mercury plunging well below anything I had anticipated. Storms rolled in with alarming speed, swallowing the sky in thick, roiling clouds and driving sheets of snow that stung my face like shards of glass. The wilderness, once a quiet companion, now felt hostile, an adversary testing my limits and patience. I could no longer shake the feeling that I was being watched, that something unseen was tracking my every move. One night, as the wind howled louder than ever, I was jolted awake by a violent shaking of my tent. It was as if some enormous force was clawing at the fabric, trying to pull me out into the blizzard. My heart raced as I grabbed my flashlight and peered into the swirling whiteness, but there was nothing there, no animal, no figure, just the ceaseless storm. When I stepped outside, the ground around my camp was unlike anything I'd ever seen before. The footprints had multiplied, encircling my tent in an eerie, perfect ring. They were the same massive, irregular prints I'd found earlier, but now they seemed to close in on me, a silent warning etched into the snow. The next morning, shaken but determined, I set out to explore the area where I'd seen the figure days before. As I moved through the dense forest, I noticed strange symbols carved into the bark of several trees. I had seen plenty of markings from hunters and explorers over the years, but these were different, deep, deliberate, almost ritualistic. Some resembled ancient runes, while others looked like crude depictions of eyes or twisted faces. My fingers traced the grooves, and a cold shiver ran down my spine. Whoever, or whatever, had made these marks was sending a message, but I couldn't decipher its meaning. Worse still, my attempts to call for help were thwarted by a mysterious radio interference. Each time I tried to reach out, static filled the airwaves, drowning out any chance of connection. It was as if the wilderness itself wanted to isolate me completely, cutting off any hope of rescue. I checked my equipment repeatedly, convinced there had to be a technical malfunction, but the interference persisted. The silence on the other end of the radio only amplified my growing sense of vulnerability. That night, the noises began. Whispers rode on the wind, so faint I wasn't sure if they were real or just my imagination playing tricks on me. The howls that echoed through the trees were unlike any animal I'd ever heard. They were mournful, almost human in their intensity, and they seemed to come from all directions at once, surrounding me in a chilling cacophony. I huddled inside my tent, trying to block out the sounds, but sleep was impossible. Every rustle, every snap of a twig outside made me jump. I thought back to a winter expedition years ago when I'd been part of a team stranded on a mountain ridge. One night, a blizzard trapped us inside our tents, and strange, unexplained noises kept us on edge, soft thumps on the tent walls, whispers in the wind, and shadows flickering just beyond the firelight. Back then, we joked nervously, attributing it to the mountain's wildness. But now, alone and vulnerable, those memories no longer brought comfort, they felt like grim foreshadowing. By the third night, the atmosphere around my camp had turned oppressive. The footprints were no longer confined to a circle, they had spread outward, branching into the forest like dark veins. My tent shook again, this time with more force, and I caught glimpses of shifting shapes just beyond the snowbanks. I managed to snap a few photos with my flashlight, hoping to capture evidence of what was stalking me. The images showed blurred, massive forms lurking in the shadows, too large and vague to identify but unmistakably present. I kept telling myself it was a wild animal, perhaps a bear or a moose disturbed by the storm. But deep down, I knew it wasn't. The patterns of movement, the markings on the trees, the unnatural howls, they pointed to something else. Something ancient, something that didn't belong in the realm of ordinary wildlife. The cold gnawed at me, seeping into my bones and dulling my senses. My rations were running low, and the storm showed no signs of abating. I considered packing up and retreating, but the thought of leaving without understanding what I had encountered was unbearable. There was a story buried in this frozen wilderness, a secret that had remained hidden beneath years of snow and ice. And whether I was ready or not, I was part of it now. That night, as I stared into the darkness beyond my tent, I remembered a story a local had told me before I left, a tale of a traveler who vanished in these woods, consumed by the cold and something else no one dared name. The man's screams were said to echo through the blizzards, carried on the wind like a warning to those who follow. I shivered and pulled my jacket tighter, hoping that I wouldn't become the next chapter in this grim legend. The storm raged on, relentless and unforgiving. The wilderness had revealed a glimpse of its terrifying secret, and I was trapped inside its icy grip, caught between fear and fascination, between survival and the unknown. As I struggled through the relentless storm, my thoughts drifted to others who had faced the unforgiving grip of winter, and the horrors that sometimes come with it. I recalled a story told to me by an elder in a small mountain town, a tale of a family trapped in a remote cabin during one of the most brutal winter blizzards on record. The family had sought refuge from the storm, only to find that something, or someone, was lurking just beyond the frosted windows, stalking them through the howling winds and swirling snow. The family's ordeal began innocuously enough, the father chopping firewood while the children played inside, the mother preparing a meager meal. But as night fell, strange noises echoed through the trees, a scraping, a low growl that seemed to circle their cabin like a predator marking its territory. Their dog, usually calm, whimpered and refused to leave the hearth. As the blizzard intensified, so did the presence outside, growing more menacing and deliberate. Shadows shifted in the corners of their vision, and the family's hope began to wane with each passing hour. One harrowing night, the air grew so thick with tension that silence became impossible. The family huddled together as the storm battered the cabin walls, and a series of frantic knocks and scratches came from the door. No matter how many times the father peered outside, he saw nothing but swirling snow and the faint glow of ice crystals reflecting the moonlight. Yet the sounds persisted, growing louder, more desperate. The terror was not just of the storm, but of the unseen force that seemed determined to break through their fragile sanctuary. Their story ended in whispers, with neighbors finding the cabin abandoned after the storm passed, no sign of struggle, but the heavy weight of fear still lingering in the air. Not long after, I thought of another chilling account from the Rockies, an experience of a group of stranded hikers caught in a sudden avalanche. They had sought shelter in an abandoned mine shaft, hoping to wait out the deadly storm. The mine, locals said, was haunted by the spirits of miners who had perished decades earlier, trapped beneath tons of rock and ice. The hikers reported eerie lights flickering in the darkness, whispers that seemed to come from the very walls, and shadows moving just beyond the reach of their flashlights. One night inside that cold, confining space, the group was awakened by a metallic clanging echoing through the tunnels. They followed the sound deeper into the mine, only to find a collapsed passage and a chilling message scratched into the rock, a warning left by the lost miners themselves. The hikers fled back to the entrance, hearts pounding, and barely escaped the avalanche that sealed the mine behind them. The stories of the spirits and the warning remained etched in their memories, a haunting reminder that some places carry the weight of tragedy and unrest long after the snow melts. These stories, along with my own experience, converge on a singular truth: winter is not just a season of cold and snow, it is a realm where isolation magnifies fear, where the power of nature can strip away safety, and where unseen dangers lurk in the shadows. The unforgiving cold is not merely a physical threat but a vessel for something more sinister, something ancient and relentless. As I sit here, my fingers numb and my breath visible in the frigid air, I can't help but feel that my story is now part of this chilling tapestry. The footprints circling my camp, the eerie howls carried on the wind, the strange symbols etched into the trees, they signal that the wilderness holds secrets beyond human understanding. Whether it is the restless spirits of those lost to the cold, or something altogether more primal and terrifying, I have come face to face with winter's darkest side. I don't know what awaits me in the days ahead. The storm shows no sign of relenting, and the silence between the howls grows heavier. But one thing is certain: the wilderness has revealed itself not as a peaceful retreat, but as a place where survival hinges not just on skill and courage, but on confronting the unknown horrors buried beneath the snow.